Hi and welcome to Who Really Cares. My name is Nikki and welcome to the podcast brought to you by Carers in Bedfordshire. We've created this podcast to share information primarily for unpaid carers as we support them. That's what we do. So I have the pleasure of talking to a wide range of fascinating people, carers and professionals who work in the industry. And it's a way of us for sharing information, telling each other stories, giving carers a voice is also really important. So welcome to the show. Now today I'm joined by a fascinating lady. Her name is Moona. She's been caring for basically her entire life. And so she tells us today about how caring for her mother primarily has massively impacted her life, her entire life. And she gives insight into the amazing things that she's learnt along the way. So this is a good one. So grab a cup of tea, put your feet up and enjoy my chat with Moona. Hi Moona, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi.
You've got a really interesting story, and it's funny because at least 3 people have come up to me and said, you need Moona on your podcast. You should talk to Moona. So I couldn't resist. And we did chat briefly a while ago, but you have got a really, really interesting story. You started caring from a very young age, isn't that right?
Yes, very, very young. But when you do it as a child, you don't actually see yourself as a carer. You just slot into that role and not realise that's what you are doing.
Yeah. So you were how old when you started caring?
Well, I'm the youngest of 6, so it's quite difficult to know at what point I was purely on my own, probably as a teenager, but very, very early on. The story is that my younger brother had an 11-month-old baby brother, and my mum and I and my 11-month-old baby brother went on holiday, and he was given water from a well, and as a result, he died on holiday. And that just left my mum in deep depression. So I don't suppose I was caring for her at that age, but it had a massive impact in that I lost my mother. She was so heavily drugged up, she couldn't be a mum to me. I don't ever remember her ever hugging me or doing anything a mother would do.
Right.
And I suppose your siblings don't necessarily do that. I think my second brother did. He was 10 years older than me, and he sort of slotted in that role. But I lost my mum quite early on, so the caring sort of started as my siblings all sort of moved away, and then I was sort of left on my own with my mum.
And so what was that like? Was it really just mental health that she was struggling with through that time?
Yeah, and it got worse because where it was severe depression, she then became a schizophrenic. And the difficult thing was that her whole illness was aimed around protecting her children. So she just wanted to make sure we were safe. So this was a lady, a very traditional Pakistani lady who couldn't really communicate in English, yet she would sit and watch the news and say that they were talking about us, and they were telling her who was going to come and steal her children, and that she had to protect us, and would say, right, you're not allowed out of the house because you're going to get stolen today. And they told me on the news. And the one person that spoke to her a lot, you're Australian, was Neighbours, Madge in Neighbours years ago. And Madge was her confidant. So if ever Madge came on the screen, we would all panic because we would know, it's like, oh my God, Madge is telling me what's going to happen next. And she would have these crazy ideas, and it was all around her children being stolen. And then she would try and stop us from going to school. And luckily, we actually lived in a cul-de-sac, so there wasn't many people walking past. But she would sit at the window, and if she ever saw a strange man, she'd say, he's coming, he's going to come and steal you. And there was a lot of mental things that we had to deal with. And our family, even though we were 6, we were almost like 2 families. So I had a sister 13 months older than me and another sister who was 18 months older than her. And then there was a 6-year age gap where the other older 3 were 9, 10 and 12 years older than me. So when because she was ill, and in those days my parents had come over and were traditional way of thinking, arranged my older brother's marriage when he was 18 and I was 6. So it was a year after my brother died, because they thought his wife would come over and help look after the younger 3 because she was not capable of looking at it. So her illness had a massive impact on all of us. And then my sister was married at the age of 17. She had an arranged marriage again, because it was almost like, right, let's just deal with those. We only have to deal with the younger 3. So my father was trying to think of how best to deal with us 3, with a very, very sick wife, sick mother. So the impact was quite massive on all of us. So this is what I'm saying. The siblings kept disappearing. And then my second brother, who was 10 years older than me at the age of 18, we lived in Huddersfield. He then went to university in Leeds, but took on a lot of responsibilities. So every weekend he would come home and take us to the park, take us for picnics, buy us our toys. There's not many 18-year-olds that would look after their three little sisters, and he really stepped up and sort of became like a father figure, and did a lot of that. But it was mainly about the three of us, and we didn't bond as children, because when you have a very, very sick mother, and our focus was all about trying to keep her out of her mental state, try and keep her away from the window, try and keep her away from the TV. We had to try and do all these tactics as young children. We didn't bond. It was about survival of the fittest, because if we weren't in sight of my mother, that meant we didn't have to deal with all her issues. And it was a lot of the mental issues that we had to deal with. And I think that's the hardest thing. It's almost, I think, you almost wish your mother to be physically unwell, because you can deal with that. But when it's mental, you just don't know what's coming next. You don't know what crazy ideas she's going to come up with. You don't know what story she's going to tell when you come home. I'd go to school and I'd be worrying about my mom, thinking, what is she up to? Is she doing something safe? Is she doing something silly? What crazy ideas has she got today? And she didn't often leave the house, but when she did go shopping, because my dad did most of the shopping, she wouldn't look when she crossed the road. She would just keep walking. So I used to have to keep hold of her and say, Mum, this car's coming, we can't cross yet. So it was almost like I was a mother to my mother, very early on.
Yeah, a lot of young carers say the same thing about feeling like they become the parent to some extent. But it's interesting what you said about the mental health side of it was what is so difficult. Because if it's a physical condition and you can see it, and mum needs help tying her shoelaces or mum needs help getting out of bed, that's sort of, you can categorize that. But when it's a mental illness, it's so much more difficult.
Yeah, and it's hard with the outside world, because people don't see what we see. And I don't know if you've ever come across anyone who's schizophrenic, great actors and actresses. So she knew how to behave when other people were there, and she'd put on this great show of trying to be normal when she wasn't, and she'd have all these crazy ideas. But if anyone came to visit, she hated people being in the house, and if I ever sat next to her, she'd be pinching me under the table saying, tell them to leave, tell them to get out of my house, they're spying on me. Everyone was a spy. Her favourite word was jasus, and in Punjabi, jasus means spy. So everyone was a spy, and they were spying, and the government were plotting. Everything was plotting to steal her children. So this thought of stealing her children was something she couldn't get out of her mind. And I think that was the hardest thing, because we couldn't share what was going on with the outside world, because nobody else really saw it apart from family, and relatives.
It's interesting because you were saying that your dad sort of arranged these marriages young in a way to kind of get you guys looked after. It's almost like outsourcing care help in a different way. And was there anybody else helping, or was it really much a very family issue?
It was very much closed doors. You don't discuss it with anyone outside. My mum was lucky in the sense that when my father came to this country in 1960, and when he came with 5 of mum's brothers. One of them died when I was a child, but the other 4, 2 went to Glasgow and 2 went to Edinburgh. And so every summer he would send her to Scotland and say, right, go spend time with your brothers. And her brothers adored her. She was big sister to 3 of them, and she loved them. So they would fuss over her, pamper her, and it would just build up her mood a little bit. And I used to go with her. I was always there by her side wherever she was. And I think she had a great support network, but we didn't. And what she would say to the uncles, she didn't mean to say it, but she was always looking for sympathy, that when you're depressed, people want attention. And she was always looking for attention, and she'd be saying, oh, my children neglect me, my children aren't great. So my uncles would get cross with me, saying, why don't you look after your mum? We were there, we were doing it all. And then I would say to Mum, why do you say that? Why do you say we're not there? Why do you say we're not with you? But it was just, and then she'd sort of deny it, saying, no, I didn't say that. But it was always like looking for sympathy. So my mother was pampered and very well looked after. And I would say our Asian community are not great with mental health, but she was fortunate. She had a very supportive husband who actually supported her through it. And then she had these 4 brothers that absolutely loved and adored her and gave her a lot of attention. And then she
Right.
had all the children running around after her trying to keep her normal and sane and keep her happy. So it was all about my mum. And I think as a teenager, I really quite begrudged her. And that was a really difficult time because to me, in my mind, I knew all this was due to the loss of my baby brother. And I couldn't understand why she'd sort of forgotten about us and the full focus was him. She cried every single day for that baby. Every day she cried. And we weren't allowed to mention his name. Um, and yeah, she was worried about us because the whole point of her mental illness was she didn't want us stolen. But the impact it had on us, because there was this hysterical, screaming lady in the house that was just going mad and would say,
Mm.
"You can't step out of the house. You cannot go to school." And we had a father who was very much about, you've come to this country, you've got great opportunity, you have to go and get a degree, you have to go to university. You know, he went to every single parents' evening because he wanted us to be educated. And then we had this mother that was saying, you can't go to school, you know, you're going
Gosh.
to get kidnapped. So it was very difficult for us at the
And
time.
yeah, and it sounds like you said, she had a great support network. Everyone was focused on her, but not so much focused on you guys and the
Yeah.
carers, the young carers that were impacted. And
Yes.
so, yeah, I mean, I don't know what it's interesting because, I mean, culturally, um, I think there's a big divide between people who, like from where you are, who like to keep things within the family and don't outsource for help. And we've noticed that with the people who register with us. There's big cultural gaps there because
Yeah.
is it? Do you think it's because they're more private, or do you think that it's just because they think that this is something we should do for each other?
I asked my mum once when other stuff was going on in the house. And I said to Mum, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you support me? And she said, because I thought you were going to be taken away by social services. So they didn't want the attention to be drawn to the family because they thought we'd just be taken away.
Mm,
And they didn't understand that actually there's support there that can help you in the house. They just thought, right, what's going to happen is my children are going to be taken away. And her whole fear was about the children being taken away. And that's what they thought. They thought if we ask for support, and I suppose they never really understood that we were struggling. We were clothed, we were fed. So I don't think they ever thought of our emotional needs. It was
no,
just you're there and you're in a big family, you're okay.
I mean it's funny because it's like her mental health issues weren't visible and neither were yours.
Yeah,
And, I guess that's why as you grow up and you can look back and evaluate, you can realize there were shortcomings there and stuff. But I guess at the time that's so difficult because they're so
yeah.
focused on her.
And I mean, I tell the story of how I did want to talk to someone, just someone to hear me to what I was going through because it was so tough. And then you have to sit through your O levels and your A levels, and you've just got all this madness going on in the background. And I tell the story of when I was 16, and by this point, the siblings had gone to university or they'd all gone somewhere. My second sister, who was 17, had decided to go and live with my brother to do her A levels. She couldn't take any more, so she moved to York. And I remember coming down one day, and it was in the evening. Our mother was lining up the knives by the back door. And I asked her what she was doing, and she said, well, she goes, I heard on the news, the postman is going to kill you. So I'm actually going to kill him before he gets to you. So she was actually going to kill the postman. And this is the point when I thought, I have to do something. And as a 16-year-old, I was bringing my brothers and sisters, pleading with them to help me get her sectioned. And she'd been sectioned before, so the mental health team were very familiar with her. Um, and they were saying, no, you're in the house. It's up to you to deal with it. You have to do it. So I had to go and get the doctors involved and get her sectioned. And it's really difficult because when someone is sectioned, she never ever had any insight into her illness. So she was on medication. And even when she was in her normal state, she never understood she had this illness. So when she was being sectioned, the police turn up, the ambulance turn up, and she's actually taken and carried kicking and screaming from the house. And I'm stood there thinking, I have just caused this for my mother. Did I do the right thing? And I know in the back of the mind, I did do the right thing, but it's so difficult to watch. And it's a lot for a 16-year-old to take.
Mm.
And I went to school, and I got on. I was very fortunate academically. I did well, and I didn't really have to study very hard. And I enjoyed school. It was my break from home. It was my normal state. So I was good at English, and my English teacher asked us all to write an essay on our life from our earliest memory to now. And I thought, well, this is my opportunity to pour my heart out. Everything that I've gone through, I can share with this lady now. Because I wasn't confident enough to go up to anyone and tell them. So I wrote it all down. I wrote pages and pages of what I was going through. And I expected her to, take me to one side and say something. And I got an A+ for my essay. And she'd written this lovely bit at the back of how she was so touched that I'd shared my life with her, and it was all very emotional, and I was very eloquent in the way I'd written it. She handed my essay out back to me as she did with everybody else's. No eye contact, nothing, never said a word about it.
Oh my gosh.
So that was
Oh
my
my
one
gosh.
chance for someone to just listen to me, and she just didn't, and I don't know why. Because she wrote a lovely piece at the back of the essay. I still remember it day to day. Very touched, and I read it and reread it and reread it. But she never said anything.
That's bizarre. I find that really sad. That breaks my heart, Mona, because it's like I can just imagine you like hoping that this is my chance to somebody to know.
Yeah.
And for
I
her to
mean,
just, I mean, I mean, if that had happened to me, I guess I'd sort of just give up and go, okay, well, I've tried to tell somebody and it didn't work. Did you
well,
try again? Or,
no, no, because I never wanted to be taken away from mum. I loved mum, and family environment when she was normal. I would never have wanted to be away from all that and my siblings. But I just wanted someone that I could go and say, do you know what, it's so tough. All I
yeah.
wanted was someone to listen to me.
Mm.
And I think that's what I hope for now, that if someone does, it's not about, you always have this fear a social worker is going to jump in and do the wrong thing. You don't want to be taken away from the family. You just want someone to say, I understand, I hear you, I know what you're going through, we're always here, come and talk to us. And, school counselling, you think they would do that. But I suppose in those days, it was the 80s.
Yeah.
It wasn't available, or it wasn't, I don't know why. I don't know why she
No.
didn't. And I was too shy to ever say to her,
Mm.
go up and say anything to her. But I
It's,
don't know.
I mean, I hope that it's different now because we've got, the conversation is wider and each school does tend to have sort of a counsellor and I would hope now that you would have, if a child
Yes,
today writes that essay, that they would be referred.
I hope so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, that's heartbreaking. And so, as you grew up, and I'm assuming you went off to university and everything. So, how did it change for you then? Like, did you carry on caring? What happened
It,
with it?
it was quite interesting because my mother had such a dominant part in all of our lives. So it was the Hida, who was a year older than me. My mum, actually, when she was pregnant with my baby brother, you get gum disease, and in those days they just took all her teeth out, so she always had dentures, and she always had problems with her dentures. So the sister a year older than me decided to become a dentist. She wanted to sort mum's teeth out, and the one Rahana, who was 18 months older than her, became a social worker because she wanted to help other children that was going through us.
Oh wow.
I decided to study chemistry and worked in the pharmaceutical industry and worked for a company that produces antipsychotics because I wanted to understand all about schizophrenia and understand about antipsychotics and make sure my mum was on the right medication. So when I understood it, I went back to her GP saying, no, she needs to be on this medication. So my mother had a massive influence on our future careers as well. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, and the thing is, after I went to university and it was just my parents on their own, they then moved to live across from my eldest brother and his wife. I decided to go back home, and Zahida, who's a year older than me, and Rana were like, "You're mad. Why are you going home? Why don't you just go and get a job somewhere else?" But I almost felt I was the youngest, and I'd probably spent the most time with us. I just felt I needed to go back and help support them, and that's what I did. So um, her schizophrenia never really went away, and it died down. It went a lot more subtle and gentle. And at that time, I joined the pharmaceutical industry and was busy trying to get her on the right medication. Um, but then not probably, I don't know how many years after that, she then had a stroke and then had vascular dementia. So then the caring changed into another form. So
Oh my goodness.
she was never in the right mind, if you say, for very long.
Oh,
Yeah.
bless. I mean, I think that's fascinating that you and your siblings ended up working in and around what they had learned, because a lot of carers struggle with employment after caring or looking through employment and don't realize that the skills that they have learned and the knowledge base that they've built up is so valuable in so many different areas. And I think it's interesting that each one of your siblings went a different way, but it's all connected.
It was all connected to my mum in a way
Yeah.
of how can we help her. And then I gave up my career. I ended up with a brain tumor, so I gave up working for 10 years. But then when I came back, it was like, what do I do with myself now? And because by that time, both my parents had dementia, mum had already passed away, I thought I've got to go into care because the impact of dementia on a family is as massive as possibly dealing with someone with schizophrenia. It's a massive impact.
Mm.
And I actually saw how my dad cared for my mum, and it was incredible because he was so soft and gentle with her. And he was even when she was depressed. But when she had dementia, she regressed back to the stage where she'd just given birth to her baby. And my dad used to carry a cushion around, and whenever she was frantic, saying, "I've lost the baby," he'd say, "No, I've got the baby," and putting the baby to sleep. And he just slotted into her world. And I watched him with absolute fascination, thinking this man has no idea what dementia is, but he just knew what to do. And
That's incredible.
when she actually died, I was actually, we'd moved to the US and the volcanic ash was in the sky, and I couldn't get home in time until she'd actually passed away. But when I got home, went to a funeral, and I took my father back with me for 3 weeks. And every day he cried for my mom. And I said to him, "How did you know what to do? How did you know how to deal with her dementia?" And he goes, "I didn't." He goes, "Every day I got up and my aim was just to keep her happy and put a smile on her face." And that's what he did. And that's what brought me into care, because I thought that's what it's all about. It's just about keeping that person happy.
That's so incredible. I love that story because I know so many dementia carers,
Yeah, yeah,
that and the repetition and and it goes and it's like honestly how you don't feel that frustration.
yeah. And
And
he was amazing. He actually
mm,
didn't. He was so calm with her all the time. And he was either her husband, her brother, or the burglar. And it was actually quite entertaining when he was a burglar, because I would get the phone call and my dad would say, "Oh, she's in that mood again." And she'd come on the phone and she'd go, "Oh my God, there's this man in the house and I don't know what he's doing here. He's come to steal stuff." But he would reenact whatever role she thought he was. When he was the burglar, he would grab something and he would run out of the house. And as soon as he was outside, she would calm down. And he'd come walking back in through the other door and she'd say, "Oh," she'd completely forgotten the fact that he was a burglar and she'd just see him as a husband. But it was actually quite entertaining to watch them. And
that's incredible. I mean, it almost sounds quite fun. I mean, I know it's not, but
it's not.
the way that he
He
approached it, he managed to put some humor into it, which
absolutely. And there was another time when she thought he was her brother. And in our culture, you don't call a brother by the name, you say brother. And she sort of leaned and says, "Brother, have you seen my husband?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, he's gone out shopping. He'll be back in a minute." He got up out of his chair. He went out of the back door, walked round the outside of the house, came in through the front door, and he said, "I'm here." And she goes, "Oh my God, where have you been? You've been gone for ages." And he goes, "Oh no, I met so many people on my walk." He sat back in the same chair and he talked all about their old friends that he'd seen on this imaginary journey, and he just kept her happy. He's going, "Oh, how is so and so? How is so and so?" It was incredible to watch them, and I'm thinking how you can keep someone with dementia in this lost world happy, and he managed to do it, which was amazing.
well, he just sounds like an incredible individual because I mean, he was caring for her as well as with all the depression and schizophrenia for his entire adult life.
Yeah,
Uh,
and trying to do the best for his children because he knew his wife could make the decisions, and whether he
what
did the right or the wrong thing. In my brother and sister married at a very young age is it's they're the only two that didn't get a degree. The rest of us did. Um, But he
yeah.
forced us into education, and one of his biggest fights in life was the equality of women. He had 4 daughters, and it was always about the equality of women. And I'm a Muslim, my father was quite religious. And on a Friday, the Muslim men go to the mosque to pray. He used
Mm.
to take me with him. I was the only female amongst this congregation of men that was praying alongside them. And it was him almost challenging the other men to tell me that my daughter's not equal to you. So it's a massive statement to the community. No one ever said anything to him. He was only
Wow.
5'2" and 7.5 stone. He was a tiny man, but he was a force to be reckoned with. But I actually admired him that he actually did that to the community. But he was a very forward-thinking man. This man was born in 1929. He was way ahead of his years. He was, the love and the care he gave my mum, she was very, very lucky.
Yeah. I mean, he just sounds incredible and on so many levels.
He is.
If we had the Oscars for carers, he would win the award.
He would. He probably wouldn't get anything for being a good father because we were petrified of him as a child. He was a
Really?
very, very strict dad. And it was, we spoke when we were spoken to, otherwise we didn't speak.
Wow.
And because he was the dominant figure in the house, he would work. We lived in a council house. We were poor. We lived off lentils for days. We couldn't afford anything, but he worked. And he would go and do any odd jobs, plumbing jobs, whatever, from 7 in the morning till 2. And then 2 till 10, he worked in the wool mill industry in Yorkshire. And he'd go to the factory. So nobody was allowed to eat dinner until he came home. So even when I was a young child, I would come home from school and I wouldn't be fed until he came home. It'd be about 10:30 and we would have dinner then. So, we were starved. But
Gosh.
he had a lot of authority in the house. So
Mm.
he was very, very strict, but he didn't show his emotion. But he cried when I graduated and he gave me a big hug. And that was the first time I ever remember him giving me a hug. But
Oh,
he was very, very close to me. Out of the 6 children, I was the one he confided in. I was the one he talked to. I was the one who said, I want you to do this. I want you to do that. Take responsibility for everything. Put a lot of authority on my shoulders. Where most Asian families would give it to their sons, he didn't.
yeah.
It was all on my shoulders.
Wow. It's funny that he could be such a strict father, but then show such warmth and compassion to his wife. And
Yeah, he cared for us. He just didn't show it. It was. I don't know. Maybe it was a cultural thing. He just
maybe,
didn't. I don't know.
I mean, I
Um,
guess he thought, well, I'm showing it because in a pragmatic way, I'm working, I'm supporting you, I'm pushing you so that you achieve your potential and all those things. I think sometimes, yeah, that's a way of showing love.
he was probably brought up in an environment where you don't hug and kiss the children. It's just, you just get on with it.
Yeah.
They're fed, like I said, you're fed and clothed, and that's their responsibility. And make sure that obviously we're disciplined and we're well behaved.
Mm.
But when you see him as a grandfather, he had 20 grandchildren and a load of great grandchildren. They would always make sure that we all came together on the same weekend to visit because we're spread all over. One's in Scotland, one was in Kent, we were everywhere.
Mm.
But if we ever visited, they would gather all 6 children. He would go and get a box of pomegranates and he would sit there taking out the seeds of all the pomegranates, put them in 20 bowls for all the grandchildren and hand them out. And the grandchildren absolutely loved and adored them. And we would all have bedrooms as adults. And the grandchildren were all on duvets on the floor downstairs. Mum and Dad's bedroom was downstairs because Mum was disabled
Mm.
after her stroke. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, Dad would come out, sit on the sofa, watch all the children be mischievous and naughty and whatever, and then just go back to bed. And they're like, "Oh, we never ever got in trouble." And they were called Big Mummy and Big Daddy. And I don't know, you may not remember, but in the olden days, there was wrestling, and there was a man called Big Daddy who wrestled. And my father loved him, so he was named Big Daddy after this wrestler, even though Dad was only 5'2". But yeah, so as we got older, there's a lot of happy memories. But as a
Mm.
teenager, that was probably my worst years.
Gosh. And interesting that after watching your dad care for your mum with dementia, that you went into the care industry.
Yes, it had a massive impact because I didn't know where to go, what was I going to do with myself having not worked for 10 years.
Mm.
And caring was something that I knew that just came naturally. And
Yeah.
because I'm so passionate, what upsets me when people are not treated well, that really upsets me. So that's when I came into this. And my biggest concern was, how do I know that the carers are going to do the right thing? How am I going to find the right people that are not going to mistreat the clients, mistreat the elderly?
Yeah.
So that was my first concern. But when you find the right people, and I've been open for 10 years now. For the first 7 years, I would do every single training myself because I would watch the people thinking, would I want this person to look after my mum?
Yeah.
We always do what we call the mum test. And, the staff are amazing. I'm very, very lucky that we have found these great people. And it's just so lovely to be surrounded by like-minded people. A lot of them have been on their own personal caring journeys that have brought them to care. So we all understand each other.
I know caring's an interesting thing because some people take to it naturally and others don't.
Yeah.
And if you're thrust into caring, you just don't know which type of person you are until you're kind of in it. And
Yeah. And I think that you have to have some personal connection, because if you didn't, it's hard to do. Because I grew up with not knowing the elderly, and as a child, because obviously the eldest group we had was the aunties and uncles and mum and dad, because all the older generation were abroad, so we never had grandparents. We didn't understand the meaning of grandparents, and it's only as our parents grew older that we then had an older generation. So as a child, I never connected with the elderly. But then when I watched my parents become grandparents, and then I thought, oh, this is the bit that I'm missing. I never had that. And it's so lovely to see
no,
them interact with their grandchildren. And then you start understanding the elderly and the love they can give. And then I see that in my clients, and it's just so lovely to see them.
yeah, it's funny because I think it's part of our society has kind of stopped that circle of life because young people don't tend to see the elderly as much. Whether I think that people move away from their grandparents or parents and raise a family in another location has something to do with it. But also, I don't know. I mean, I feel like that circle of life isn't as appreciated as it could be in our society,
Hmm.
and that would help people. It would help people, to learn about caring for the elderly and all of
Yeah,
that sort of stuff.
yeah, absolutely.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult when people are thrust into caring and they have no experience.
It's really tough, and we see the impact on a professional level. I see the impact on the families is just incredible. And this
Yeah.
is where I advise anyone and everyone to actually get professional support. And I saw it on my brother. So my second brother, as soon as mum died, we discovered that dad had Alzheimer's and he'd been covering it. And this very happy chap who had become very bubbly, was always joking around as he got older, just shut down and he stopped talking, and he just wanted to be with mom. He lived another 5 years, unfortunately, in this silent world. But my brother took him on, and my brother really, really struggled. It almost broke him because my dad was getting up and soiling the bed and wetting it in the middle of the night. My brother was a lecturer, and so couldn't function during the day because he was up all night dealing with my dad and ended up giving up his job. It had a massive negative impact on him, and I kept trying to persuade him, get professional support, but he was like, no, I can do it. You don't need to be a superhero, because it breaks down that relationship of father and son,
Yeah.
mother, daughter. Um, and you need to be able to maintain that and be there and still provide them the support without being exhausted.
And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people feel guilt though. Like I should be able to do
Yes,
this. I should be
yes,
able to do this on my own. So
yeah.
how do you answer that one? How do people not feel guilty?
Well, the thing is that you're not providing the right support because of the frustration and the anxiety and the stress it causes. So
Mm.
actually, that relationship changes. So my brother was getting angry with dad when he should have really, and he should have still been able to enjoy him and be calm. So everyone everyone that comes to me always say I feel guilty, and you shouldn't
Mm.
have to feel guilty, because you should still be the daughter, not the carer. And it is very, very hard because you do feel obliged that you have to do it, but you don't
And
have
but
to.
and what a lot of people don't realise is that even if you're cared for, the best course of action is to place them in professional care home. They are still a carer. A lot of people
Yes.
don't realise that. Even though they are
Yeah.
getting professional help, they're not giving up that role of caring for the parent. They're just changing the way they're doing it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing is obviously get care at home. So they're in the familiar environment. And the reason people are reluctant is because they're thinking a stranger's going to come in. Are they going to steal? What are they going to be like? They're on a
Mm,
one-to-one. It's a lone worker. Will they abuse my parent? If you find a decent company, all that is checked, and they have all the checks, the DBS, the references, but we spot check them. We do lots of checks to make sure they are safe. And when you see the sort of people we have working for us, I've got people like directors in their own business. I've got people that are receptionists. I've got people that are volunteer in the church. They're genuine, kind-hearted people that would, they would, they, I mean, they sob their hearts out when their clients die because they've become an extension to the family. And they may have seen that same person every day for 4 or 5 years, and that person dies. How can you not form a bond? And and a lot of my staff will sit on front row with the family because that's the bond they've built. But when you first say that to someone, that you're going to have a stranger coming into the house, there's obviously panic will naturally set in because you don't know what you're going to get. And I've been through the same thing with my mother-in-law. So now I've ended up being a distant carer for my mother-in-law, where she was living in Chester. She has 3 sons, but I almost feel like a female needs to get involved. So I was constantly watching her on the cameras to make sure she's safe. And she had live-in care, but at night time she was sundown and she had dementia, so she was up all night, and I just needed to make sure she was safe. And one morning, 4 to 5 o'clock every morning, I would wake up just to watch the 6 cameras to see where has she been. And one morning I woke up and she was on the floor. So then I went back in the camera to see at what point she fell. She'd been on the floor for 6 hours. And she was fine, but she just sat there. She just didn't know how to get up. So she just sat on her bottom for 6 hours. It's really quite tough. And obviously she'd wet herself by that time. And at that point, we were ringing the carer, trying to get her out of bed. So the carer came down, called paramedics, and they were fine. They just needed to lift her up. But it's really, really tough, even from a distance. And we have actually finally moved her to a care home just because we want to bring her close to us. And, she's moving into Bedford on Friday. So that caring, as you say, even if they're in a care home, you still are there watching over them, making sure they're safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think caring is a process, isn't it? Because it constantly changes with the condition of the person or the circumstances, and I think that's the skill that carers learn, is that adaptability, that their role is constantly changing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And my husband didn't really want me to get involved. He was saying, "Oh no, she's my mum, I'll do it," and I couldn't. And I was like, "No, you need to do this and you need to do that." And when I actually recognised she had dementia, it was 9 years ago. It was really, really early on. Nobody else could see it. And I kept saying to my husband, "She has dementia." He said, "No, she hasn't." And both the brothers said, "She's absolutely normal. There's nothing wrong with her." But I knew she was because of my experience. I'm a dementia champion with the Alzheimer's Society. I do dementia talks. I just knew it. And it was very unfortunate. We contacted her GP, and my husband's got power of attorney, and said she has dementia. My mother-in-law was still very eloquent and able to talk. In the early stages, you can't really notice, and said to them, "My family think I have dementia. I haven't." And the GP just believed her. And it was another 2 years of fighting to finally get her diagnosed. So it was a really tough journey with that one as well.
Gosh, you've got so much experience, Moona.
It's just, when someone's got dementia, people, they don't understand until you actually are involved with it, because as we get older, I'm 56 now, my memory's awful. I forget things. And if I ever say to my children I'm going to hide something, they have a massive panic. They're going, "Mum, you'll never find it again," because I never do. But the dementia forgetfulness is slightly different. And the first occasion when it happened was, we live in Oney, and we live half a mile away from where all the restaurants are. My friend came in half term and sat with my mother-in-law. She was visiting, and said, "Oh, I'm going to take the girls, my children, for lunch." And she goes, "I'll be back. I'm leaving my car on the drive. I'll be back." So off she went. 30 minutes later, my mother-in-law rang my eldest and says, "Where are you? I'm waiting to have lunch." And that is not normal forgetfulness, because you don't forget within 30 minutes that this lady you've sat and had a cup of tea with has taken your grandchildren and you can't remember it. So that is different. First sign. And then the second one was my daughter on the Monday. She was posted a present to my mother-in-law for Mother's Day, grandmother, and it was going to arrive on Tuesday. And she had a long chat with my mother-in-law saying, "I've sent you this present for Mother's Day and it's going to arrive tomorrow, but please open it on Sunday because I really want you to open it on Sunday." Tuesday, present arrived. My mother-in-law opened it and said, "It's not my birthday. Why have you sent me this?" Again, it's not your normal forgetfulness. And at that point, I thought, yeah, she's got it. Her mood changed and other things happened, but I knew then. So the early stages are quite hard, but just dealing with dementia without knowledge is a tough journey. And I would say to anyone that if you're dealing with anyone that has dementia, do your homework, do some research on it and see how you can support that individual, and take a break, because it is infuriating. It's really tough.
Yeah, and the funny thing about, well, not the funny thing, the odd thing, or the thing to remember about dementia is that it's as personal as the person. So you,
Yes.
even though you can do the research, you know that person better than anybody. You know um, how they used to be and how they are now, and all of those things, and the journey will be different for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. But just knowing some of the things about how to deal with them, how not to get frustrated. And the one thing that I always say to people about dementia is remember their feelings, because the feelings are never affected. And people tell someone off that has dementia thinking, oh, she's not going to remember. Yeah, they don't remember, but it's their feelings and the upset that goes with it, that they will still be upset. And I think that's the difference that I saw in what my dad did with mom. As he said, his aim was to keep her happy, just keep her smiling. And that's what he did. Whatever he did, whatever she said, he adjusted himself to put a smile back on her face. And I think that had a very positive impact on her.
Yeah, well, and possibly on him,
Yeah.
because you know that was a very, very gentle, calm, way of dealing with it, that sounded that he alleviated some of the stress that could have come his way by
Yes.
handling it. And I think that's actually a really good tip, to remember that there are lots of ways of doing this, and one of them can be this way, where I'm not trying to get them to remember, or I'm not trying to get them to do something. I'm actually going to go with them.
Yeah. I mean, I remember my mum, she'd had a stroke. Her left side didn't really work. But she was always crying. And she'd say to me, I can't go out. I want to go. I haven't got any shoes. And I went, okay, mum, I'll go and buy you a pair. And she was a size smaller than me. So I'd go out, buy her a pair of shoes and bring them. And she'd be really happy the next time I visited. And the next time after that, she'd be doing the same, crying, saying, I haven't got any shoes. And I said, okay, mum, I'll buy you a pair. And then it continued. And one day she said, I need a pair of shoes. And I said, Mum, I have bought you a pair of shoes. I brought them out of her bedroom. There was 19 brand new boxes of shoes. And I was that dumb. I didn't even think at that time, let's just take them away and bring the same pair
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
I kept buying the shoes and she had 19 pairs. And she looked at them. She goes, none of them belong to me. I don't know who they belong to. So I thought I was helping her, but I wasn't really helping her. And I should have actually just taken the boxes away. I think my dad probably would have known to do that. He would have taken the
Yeah,
box away and brought it back. But yeah,
Oh, that's brilliant. As we could have opened a shoe shop.
I could have done, yes.
Well, Moona, I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you went into the care industry, because you're a wealth of knowledge, and you're just, yeah, you're an absolute champion. Now, there's always a couple of questions that I ask people on the podcast, and I shouldn't finish without asking you. And one of them is, well, how was your caring day yesterday? But given that you're caring remotely, that might not be as relevant, or is it?
No, no.
No.
I didn't
So,
see her yesterday, no.
no, that's fine. And the other one, which also might be hard for you to answer, because you started caring really as a child, but it was, what do you wish you had have known at the start of your journey, your caring journey?
I think, as I say, I think the most difficult period of my life was as a teenager. And that was a lack of understanding of mum's illness. And she had schizophrenia. I don't know how I could have ever understood it. But I think had I had a support network around me, or someone that could have heard what I was going through or explained it to me. I even went to all her mental health appointments with a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist never paid any attention to me. I was just the interpreter that would interpret what my mum was saying to the psychiatrist, but they never asked me how I was and what was going on. No one ever asked me how I was, and I wish now someone had paid a bit of attention to me that was not family related, someone that was external, that just said, how are you? What's going on with you? And I think that's what I would have liked. And I was possibly too young to understand the illness, and I don't think I could have ever influenced it at that age.
No, but I think just that acknowledgement as a carer, and that question, how are you? How's it going for you?
Yes.
Is so valuable. And I don't think, really, even to this day, I don't think carers get asked that nearly enough.
And I don't even know how I even made it to university with all that going on, because it was just constant. I'd sit in the exams and my mind would be on my mother. Is she safe? Is she okay? Is she at home? What is she doing? I don't even know how I passed those exams, because the full focus was always her.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice just to be able to not have to worry about her for even a day.
Yeah.
It would have been lovely.
Yeah. Great. And so that kind of leads me on to my next question is if you were in charge, I don't know, if you were the leader of something in the government, what would you change to make life better for somebody like you or carers in general?
This government, any government, every government really needs to make a big difference to the health and social care. We need so much support. There's so many people out there that are caring for someone. Everyone's living longer. As a teenager, I remember they're saying the average lifespan was 68. People are living, I don't know, it's 87 now. It's a lot more. So you have a lot more carers out there that are neglected, don't have the right support, don't have financial support. People aren't there listening for them. We are very, very fortunate in Bedford that we've got carers in Bedfordshire. And I think the job that you all do is absolutely amazing, which is why I love volunteering there. And when I have friends in different areas saying, you must have something like this in your area, and they're like, no, we can't find anything. And I've got a friend she's 68 and she's looking after a 90-year-old mother. She is exhausted. And I said, you must have something like this. She goes, no, I can't find anyone. There's no one to give me a break. She's actually wishing that, she doesn't know how much longer she can keep doing it. And this is a major problem now in this country, that there's so many carers out there that are just being neglected, and it's affecting their mental health and also their physical health as well.
Absolutely. And the issue is that if they are not supported, then they end up just becoming a part of the system themselves, the healthcare system, because they get sick.
We see that with our clients, families, the partners, and we see the partners deteriorate more rapidly because nobody's worrying about them.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to sort of change little by little, and even conversations like this and putting these sorts of conversations out there, you never know. That might just get into the right pair of ears. So
absolutely.
Definitely worth doing. And it was joy to talk to you, Moona. You've got the most amazing life story, caring from the beginning all the way through in so many different ways.
Well, the funny thing was that it was only when I came across carers in Bedfordshire that I thought I was a child carer. I remember Anne, who used to be the CEO, asked me once, and I sort of frowned, saying, no, I wasn't a carer. And then I thought, well, actually, I was. So people in that situation will never say they're a carer.
That's right. That's one of the big issues that we have, actually, is that carers don't self-identify. They are just doing what they think they should do, and it's fine, and blah, blah. But actually, if you name it and you label yourself, it can be so beneficial, because then you can say, oh, well, no, actually, that would be good for me. But if you don't label yourself and you don't self-identify, then you just think you're doing something normal, and you're not. You are doing something super normal, something above the normal. So, it's definitely something that we're trying to promote, self-identify.
Absolutely.
And also other people identifying you as a carer, so if friends or neighbours or something and mentioning to them, I think it sounds like you're doing a lot of caring. There is support for you. Did you know that? That kind of conversation, we're trying to get that going as well, so that, other people can help their community in that way.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, thank you so much for talking to me, Moona. That was just so great. I'm in awe of you, and I'm in awe of your dad, actually, as well.
So am I. He's my big mentor. He's the one that I sort of look up to and admire and think, yeah, he did an amazing job.
He did. What an amazing life. Thank you again, and I'll see you soon volunteering with us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nikki.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Wasn't she incredible? Honestly, Moona has so much experience, so much knowledge, and such an amazing life story. She went on to tell me, we had to stop the recording because we were running out of time, but she went on to tell me that she also cared for her nephew and her niece, and also I should mention that now she runs Home Instead Bedford, which is a company that offers paid carers to come into your house and look after your loved ones. So if you are an unpaid carer and you feel like you need extra support, obviously getting professional carer help is one of the ways forward for you. Now, I'm not saying that Home Instead is the only provider available to you. There are many, and you must do your research and find the right one for you, but that is where Moona is based now. So again, thanks Moona for spending time with me. Now listen, if you enjoyed that episode, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast because I have got some amazing guests lined up and you won't want to miss the next episodes. And also, I should say, please do share the podcast with anybody in your network. There are unpaid carers everywhere and you never know who you might be helping by pointing them in the right direction. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you or being with you next time on Who Really Cares.